The sources aren't talking about the 1960s playbook of moral persuasion or appealing to the nation's conscience.
Right. The writers here basically argue that that strategy has just hit a wall.
Completely. The core thesis jumping out of these texts is that racism isn't a bug in the system that you can fix with a protest. They frame it as a permanent feature.
Which is, it's almost cynical but deeply pragmatic. And because of that view, the movement pivots to this concept of economic protectionism.
That is the big vibe shift right there. The literature distills it into this really sharp sociological formula. Basically, race is the motive for oppression, but poverty is the actual weapon.
Meaning, if you can disarm the weapon poverty, the motive doesn't really matter as much.
Exactly. You can't stop people from hating you, but you can stop them from hurting you.
And that's where they introduce the concept of functional immunity, right?
Yeah.
Or a wealth shield.
Yeah, the wealth shield.
Yeah.
In a hyper-capitalist society like the U.S., the argument is that having enough wealth literally makes the arrows of systemic racism bounce off.
I found the specific examples in the research really telling on that point. They argue things like police bias or judicial unfairness. They're often poverty issues masquerading as race issues.
Right, because if you have the money for elite counsel and character witnesses,
the system treats you differently.
It's the difference between being a victim and being a defendant. And the texts show this extends to healthcare too.
Right. We have all this data on medical bias in safety net hospitals, but the FBA solution isn't to fix the hospital.
No, it's to get rich enough to buy concierge medicine. You just opt out of the broken system entirely.
It's essentially the argument that you have to purchase the rights the Constitution was supposed to give you for free.
Buying the equal protection of the 14th Amendment. Because the state defaulted on the contract.
And that breach of contract mindset totally drives their policy demands, which explains why the movement is so hostile toward what they call the symbolic industry.
The street namings.
Right? The renaming of streets, murals, making Juneteenth a federal holiday. The sources literally describe these as pacifiers.
They view them as total distractions. The demand is strictly for tangibles. Cash, land, debt relief, things that actually show up on a balance sheet.
The movement draws a very hard line between foundational Black Americans, descendants of U.S. chattel slavery, and the broader Black diaspora.
It's a strict protectionist stance. They look at the 1870 and 1900 census data to audit a specific debt.
So reparations aren't a broad social program for anyone with melanin.
Right. The texts argue it's back pay for a specific group whose ancestors built the country's wealth without compensation.
It definitely complicates the Pan-African solidarity we saw in previous generations. They're saying the specific trauma of U.S. slavery created an economic deficit that recent immigrants just don't share.
And that actually brings us back to their skepticism of integration. They argue integration was a strategic failure that destroyed Black economic autonomy.
You see that with the references to urban renewal. It wasn't just building highways.
No, it was about dismantling independent economic engines, like Black Wall Street in Tulsa or Haiti in Durham.
When those barriers came down, the money flowed out of Black communities, not in. The FBA perspective is that they traded economic control for social proximity.
And ended up dependent on hostile systems.
So instead of fighting for a seat at the lunch counter, the goal is to own the building the lunch counter is in. Shifting from seeking acceptance to securing the power to contract.
Leverage over love. They aren't asking for an apology, they are sending an invoice.